Well, good day. My name is Mike Schlumberger. I've spent the last 30 years running and building mines. So I'd like to speak to you today about our flagship project, or our company. Certainly we'll have forward-looking statements as we move forward. And with that, so American Pacific is basically a year old at this point. While we're a new company, certainly it's not a new project. Our flagship project, Fort Cady, has been around since the 80s, and it has been fully permitted. People are going to say, first off, what is boron? And certainly what you'll find with boron is there's little bits and pieces of it in many different things. And certainly some of those tie back to EV, the electric vehicles. They tie back to conservation of energy in installations. They tie back into wind turbines and some of those things in the magnets themselves. So boron, while it's not widely known, is a very important part of our society. So the first project, or the first I would like to speak about, is our Fort Cady project and what we're doing with the company itself. So we've established a company in Apple Valley, California, which is roughly 60 miles from our site out in Barstow, California. And as I mentioned, this is not a new project, it's an older project, and there's been over $50 million already spent on the project. So this allows us to move very quickly into production. We've completed a scoping study at the end of last year to produce boric acid, and total project is about 200, I speak in short tons, but 270,000 short tons, or 245,000 tons, metric tons, as well as SOP. And with that, it's a low capex project, high operating margins, and our on-site pilot plant is currently producing brines in order to develop our flow sheet and move the project forward. We also have lithium within the ore body, and we know that it's extractable, and within phase 2 of the project we will work to get byproduct credits possibly off that lithium. And most interestingly, here recently we've added another project to our portfolio. This gives you a look at our corporate structure. And again, as I mentioned before, what are borates? We can see here quite a myriad of lists of things with borates, but certainly they're important for electric vehicles, solar PV, as well as clean technologies, insulation, food production. Boron itself is the second most applied micronutrient, so it is a very important part in food scarcity. And this shows us within the household, again, some of the things that boron is used in. Certainly it's used in glasses and ceramics. It's used in the magnets in EV, and quite a few other uses throughout the household. So when we start looking at the boron market itself is a very interesting market. It is a duopoly, and basically there are two major players within this. Eti Maden, which is the Turkish-owned enterprise, they have over 40% of the market, and the other big player in this is Rio Tinto, and on their boron California, which is just up the road from us, they have their U.S. borax facility. If we take a look at this as well, you can see that we are well positioned, because as we go into the market, over 50% of the market, the consumption of boric acid and boron products, is within Asia, with the majority of that being in China. So if you take a look at our scoping study, we released a scoping study at the end of last year, and our boric acid scoping study, we used a 25-year mine life after both phases of that. Phase 1 capex of under $100 million, so $98 million. That includes a 20% contingency, and that produced 82,000 tons, 90,000 tons of short tons of boric acid, as well as 20,000 tons of SOP. The SOP is important because that puts hydrochloric acid through the Mannheim process back into our facility, which helps reduce overall costs, as well as provides us another source of income. Phase 2, we expand that, we treble the size of the plant, both the boric acid facility as well as the SOP plant, and we are able then to fund all of that through cash flow from off the first stage. The EBITDA on this is over $150 million, and certainly you can see the IRR, a very attractive, over 41%. If you look at so last year, after listing at the end of July, we brought up up to five different drill rigs on site in order to very quickly redo our resource. And basically within that resource, we were able to drill this out before the end of last year. And basically we have over 14 million tons, or just at 14 million tons of boric acid. And you can see the split between inferred and indicated resources, and 72% of this is under our control. The low CapEx expenditure on this, like I said, it's just under $100 million to produce 90,000 short tons, 82,000 tons a year of boric acid, and the target is to fund phase 2 off of those proceeds. Infrastructure helps us to keep our costs low. SCE, Southern Cal Edison, has high-tension power lines running through the facility. I-40 is less than 2 miles away from the facility. We have nat gas that runs just outside the project boundary, and the BNSF railroad operates just across I-40 from us. We are also looking at the possibility at this point of reworking our existing pilot plant that is permitted in order to produce colemanite. This has already been done, and we're looking at that to produce early revenues as well as to develop the wells for further use. Looking at the margins, certainly we expect a very high margin off the product. Current U.S. prices of boric acid are between 800 and 1,000 tons. We use $900 a ton, and certainly you can see that the potential for high operating margins of over $500 a ton based on these numbers. Very simple flow sheet. As I mentioned before, we have an on-site pilot plant. This pilot plant has already produced over 1 million pounds of boric acid, so there's very low technology risk associated with the project. It is 2-stage crystallization and very simple. Nothing real complicated here. We also have the ability to produce gypsum. Certainly in California, the gypsum is needed as a soil amendment, as well as the SOP and the boron. So we think that we're very well positioned for this. As I mentioned, this gives us a myriad of products. Obviously, the borates, gypsum. Currently in Orange County, California, the Inland Empire gypsum sells for over $300 a ton. And we think that that's a very attractive proposition for us. SOP, certainly the high-value products within California, the nuts and fruit, also consume that SOP, the specialty fertilizer there. And certainly we have the potential for lithium within our project as well. The in-place permits, so at one point in time this mine was completely permitted, and we were permitted for 90,000 tons a year, which is why we have that 90,000 ton a year stop. Unfortunately, when we acquired the project, the folks that we acquired the project from had rescinded the air and the water quality permits. Those need to be reinstated, but we have advice from our environmental consultants that can be done in less than a year, and certainly a reinstatement is much easier than starting from scratch. The good news is the 2 main permits are there, including the potential for a railroad. And this just goes to show what the expected market is, certainly with 90,000 tons a year. That 90,000 tons a year of boric acid is less than 6 months growth in the market. So we see that as not being disruptive. The other thing of note is we have recently just signed a cooperative agreement with both Sinochem and Sinomac. We think that this is very important, not one but 2 companies that show you the scarcity of borate resources and their willingness to sign a contract with or sign an agreement with us. Shows what our steps are. We've already completed, as we had promised, the scoping study and the drilling, and we're moving forward with the furthering our DFS and test works at this point this year. Finally, I'd like to show that we have added another project to our portfolio, and that's the Salt Wells project in Nevada. We think that this complements our project very well. Certainly, historic production of borates has been produced on the site, and we think this fits very well into our portfolio as an exploration target. And thank you very much for your time.